Hello and most welcome to 1938 of the H series. We will today continue with Hao Tang's Wittgenstein and the dualism of the inner and the outer. Last time we took a gander at the expressive function of language, an invention by Hao Tang to help us reach more understanding of the difficult dualism between the senses and the conceptual. In A, there are two lists. In the paper. In A, on page 78, we saw a gradual elevation of conceptualism, or what you can call it. That we go from saying ouch in pain, yuck in disgust, wow in astonishment, help in desperation. And then doesn't it start to sound quite conceptual? How blue the sky is. Or bring it even further. That's very nice of you.
That's very nice of you.
Can you really, in the last one, can you not say it's very conceptual? It seems to be depicting something. And how the blue sky, it's almost like saying the sky is blue, like a proposition. There are no sharp borders in language. These very important conceptual sharp distinctions seem to be transversed, and the senses perpetually interpenetrating into the conceptual. No sharp difference. This, I would say, is a very, very successful approach. I do like it extensively already. Hao Tang is here very smart. And as we progress through the paper, we come to the accompanying and nothing. Yes, okay. And nothing is not dislike, unlike, from as something of which we cannot say anything. If we can't mention, have nothing to say about something, it is the same as a nothing. ponder about that, because that can give a very valuable understanding. Our language is infected by the idea that there are objects out there somewhere. We can never see them, we cannot have contact with them, and still somehow they have existence. That is almost dangerous thinking. Of course, the thinking of the left hemisphere. And we also mentioned that object in English have gotten closer and closer to some disjunct idea of a thing being somewhere distant, dead, material, of less quality. But that didn't used to be the case. The German word used by Wittgenstein in some cases is extremely thin in the sense. Doesn't bring in materiality or sharpness or thickness or heaviness, any of those things. Maybe Dinge, which is also used by Wittgenstein, has more of those traits. But Hao Tang is exquisite here, is really helpful. I come to a much greater understanding. In list B, which just passed, maybe hang on a second there. Here once more, we have a list of how the senses can be expressed and how these behavior expressions do not involve language in the strictest sense. Language. This really did it for me. Then I start to understand language as something conceptual, something way beyond. Maybe a sort of counterpart to Dinge or Gegenstände. Doesn't make sense either. They are most definitely intertwined. They have gone into each other in a most thorough way. And this is, of course, a very similar to the intellectualist view of language, which is an idea that the words of language are not concepts, they're not transcendental. They are doings just like the wincing and twisting of the body when you feel pain. They can be willful, done by the will, but they can also be closely thought out. I will continue now to read on page 85. Subchapter, just before the subchapter, the incision of language. And thanks, Kalle, for pointing clearly out where I'm supposed to start. This response is admittedly very vague, but it does point to the direction in which we should dig for genuine insights beneath Wittgenstein's diagnosis. Diagnosis. That is, we should look at the ways in which our sensory consciousness is shaped by language. And how this shaping may be involved in the etiology of the dualism of the inner and the outer. The best place to look for this, I believe, is the learning of language. In particular, the learning of a sensation language. Because it is above all through this learning that our sensory consciousness is shaped by language. Our sensory consciousness is shaped by language. Indeed. Six. The incision of language. It is a basic fact that the predominant function of language in our life, civilized communal life, is its intellectual function. Language is first and foremost our intellectual equipment. So to learn a language is first and foremost to develop or acquire and intellect. 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 This development is essentially an achievement, a positive transformation. But it also brings with it, if not a curse, the threat of a curse. The threat of a curse. This is because the very process of learning a language in particular a sensation language constantly inflicts cuts upon natural primitive unities between the inner and the outer, the cuts. Cuts. The cuts. These cuts, driven by powerful forces, then inevitably harden into firm distinctions between the inner and the outer. Thereby helping to create and entrench a general division between these two domains. This is how it starts, the start of the division, the cut. The cut.
Cut.
Cut. This entrenched general division, in turn, forms a constant background and fertile soil for the dualistic conception of these two domains as independently intelligible. Independently intelligible. Intelligible. The process whereby language learning inflicts cuts on natural primitive unities of the inner and the outer may be called the incision of language. This is quite a general phenomenon. I shall first exhibit a clear and primitive instance of it by exploiting Wittgenstein's description of how a child learns a sensation language. From this instance, I shall then derive a schema to capture the general phenomenon. The general phenomenon. Hooray! Now it's getting rather interesting. How does a child learn sensation language? This question is essentially the same as how does a child learn the meaning of sensation words? For instance, the word pain.
Ouch.
Pain.
Ouch. Ouch.
Ouch, ouch. Wittgenstein sketches an answer to this question in 244a. How does a human being learn the meaning of the names of sensation of the word pain, for example? For example. Here is one possibility. Words are connected with a primitive the natural expressions of the sensation and used in the place. A child has hurt himself and he cries, and then the adults talk to him and teach him exclamations and later sentences. Sentences. They teach the child new pain behavior. Wittgenstein's sketch, that is what follows. Here is one possibility. One possibility. Is an accurate description of the normal way in which children learn the meaning of such words as pain, pain, pain. For simplicity, I shall concentrate on the case of pain. Of pain. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Toe. The basic learning process sketched by Wittgenstein is this. Is this. At first and by nature, the child displays certain natural, inarticulate expressions of sensations. For instance, crying when in pain. Later on, and with the help of the adults, increasingly articulate expressions of sensations, exclamations, and then sentences get introduced into the child as new channels of expression. of expression, of expression, expression. The process, as often noted, is like grafting in horticulture. Horticulture. It will prove helpful to distinguish three main stages in this process.
Three main stages.
Three stages, three main stages. In the beginning, the child has only one kind of natural expression of pain, namely crying. Crying. The connection between crying and pain is simple and direct, like this. Pain to crying. This is like a proto-phenomenon, a primitive stage. Proto-phenomena. Next, the child learns exclamations. For instance, ouch.
Ouch.
Ouch. What happens during this stage is that he acquires a new channel for the expression of pain, like this. Pain takes two ways, either ouch or crying. This is the intermediate stage. Later on, the child learns to express his pains by using sentences. Sentences.
Sentences.
Sentences. At first, of course, he uses sentences only in the minimal sense of repeating them after the adults. After the adults. The adults. The adults. But gradually he develops a rough-hewn understanding and rudimentary command of the sentences. This development goes hand in hand with a refinement of it on his inside. His pains themselves become more and more finely differentiated. The picture is now roughly this. Knee pain, it hurts. Ouch, crying. Mom, my knee hurts. It hurts. This is learning a sensation language in the refined stage. Refined.
Refined. Mom, my knee hurts.
To see the incision of language most clearly, focus on the intermediate stage when H is introduced into the child. The child H. The crucial point here is that this introduction is at once a first step in the development of a sensation language and an act of incision by language. By language and incision. Here it starts. To see this, we need what we need. To see this, what we need is a change of aspect. And here we see how ouch comes to an incision of the connection between crying and pain as depicted. I'd say this is a rather important clue. This is essentially the same as figure 2. With two changes. The first change is trivial. I have made the figure vertical to visually facilitate a common comparison. The second change is crucial. The direction of the arrow representing the child's learning of ouch is reversed. This reversal is what the change of aspect consists in. It highlights the fact that in the learning process, language is making a cut upon the natural primitive unity between pain and crying. This is the establishment of the cut. The cut. this cutting or incision will become obvious when we compare figure 4 to a figure of grafting in horticulture. Figure 5. The reversal of the H arrow makes vivid the act of incision by language. The H arrow is cutting in between the pain and the crying, the crying. The crying. This is a primitive instance of the incision of language. Because H is, strictly speaking, not a proper word, but only a quasi-word, an intermediate between a proper word and a primitive cry. Cry, a cry. Ooh. It has a conventional element, an element of art, but remains close to nature, to the primitive cry of pain. But of course, there are numerous instances that are not so primitive and involve the incision of proper bits of language. For instance, the "Mom, my knee hurts" in figure 3. Change of aspect involved here is from seeing the situation as the child's acquiring a bit of language to seeing it as the adult's teaching or imparting that same bit of language to him. To him. To him. To him. To him. The metaphor of grafting is very apt here because grafting also involves at once cutting, incision, and growing, development. Development. To develop. Let's develop. And listen now. In both cases, it is a modification of nature by art. By art. Incision by art. Or of art. Dali is coming into the action. Now it is true and important that the ways in which art modifies nature, modifies, even just in learning a sensation language, are enormously complicated and hard to survey. Survey, hard to survey. Nonetheless, it seems clear that the introduction of bits of language as new channels for the expression of sensation remains the basic phenomenon in this learning. This basic phenomenon may be captured by a generalized but still simple dual aspect schema. We see going from sensation, pain, whatever that could be in itself, with the incision now, the cut, bits of language, ouch, it hurts, and to be compared to the natural stem of the tree, crying, for instance, wincing. The general picture of the development of a sensation language can now be put by adapting Wittgenstein as follows. The origin and the primitive form of our sensation language is a cry. Only from this can more complicated forms develop. Develop. Language, we may say, is a refinement. In the beginning was the cry. The cry. Word. Or the word, I would say. The work of refinement or sophistication is to complicate the relation between sensation and its expression. As the child grows up, he learns more and more ways of expressing his sensations. Sensations. Meanwhile, his sensations themselves become more and more differentiated, more and more differentiated. and the availability of channels of sensation expression alternative to the natural primitive one makes possible lying and pretense. A possibility that is eventually realized with the help from other quarters in nearly all mature human beings. Beings, or bings. When maturity is reached, the relation between sensation and sensation expression becomes very crudely like this figure 7. And now you have this double growth, which is so hard to understand without this exquisite diagram. How there are incisions that go back and actually, sort of say, affect the protophenomena. And you can get differentiated protophenomena like sharp back pain, knee pain, toothache. Those are, strictly speaking, not accessible to the toddler. It's a development of double incision going both ways. And in the end, you will be able to say, it still hurts, but not as much as yesterday. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly. This more complicated schema, read against the earlier, simpler ones, makes vivid a general process, namely the simultaneous growth of two domains, the inner domain of sensations, and the outer domain of sensation expressions. So there's no longer a before and an after. There's a simultaneous growth. What a point! What a point! What a point! And these two domains grow in a double sense. They both grow eternally, internally. That is increasing differentiation and sophistication within each domain, and grow apart. That is increasing distance between the two domains. Here we have the dualism in working. In working. In working and assisting. One feature of the internal growth or refinement of both the inner and the outer domains is worth noting. Because this feature is an antidote to the dualism of the inner and the outer. Outer. It's this is that refinement of the child's inner life depends, generally, though not slavishly, on what happens in his outer life. For his outer life, in particular, the verbal expressions of sensation that he learns soon starts to, listen now, feedback into the inner life, structuring and enriching it. As happens, for instance, when he learns to name the qualities and locations of his sensations. Of his sensations! His sensations. what is important in this process is that the outer, in particular, overt speech acts and the non-verbal actions interwoven with them plays a constitutive role for the child's inner life. That is the very contents of his sensations. And feelings are partially determined by outer realities. Consider the learning of the taste of vinegar, and in the case where the outer is tied particularly intimately to the inner, the sensation or feeling of having bent knees, bent knees, bent knees. These partially constitutive connections between the outer and the inner, pervasive in ordinary life, but hard to survey, are what they really hold, are what really hold these two domains together as an organic whole. There we have the word. I think we reached a fantastic pause situation here, because we have an organic whole. So let's stop there. Organic whole.
Page 90.
90. (1938) ends there. The second in the 12th. And we have about 11 o'clock. Let's go for some sights here. I don't think I ever before come upon such clarity here. It's very helpful. So we have the list A and the list B, and now they come together in a rather nice way. If we could go, please, Kalle, to page 85. And the third paragraph, I think it would be. And here you can see the object of this part, or the object of the whole article. 4 lines down, or 3 lines. That is, we should look at the ways in which our sensory consciousness is shaped by language, and how this shaping may be involved in the etiology of the dualism of the inner and the outer. This is exactly what he's striving for. And if you go down a bit here to the next subchapter 6, if you may, Kalle. It is a basic fact that the predominant function of language in our life is its intellectual function. And that gives a hint to how the problem evolved, or the misunderstanding. The intellectual being completely disjunct from the expressive. That is, in a nutshell, and further down, we have a sentence about 5 or 6 lines. This is because the very process of learning a language, in particular, a sensation language, constantly inflicts cuts. Yeah, you got the cuts here upon natural primitive unities between the inner and the outer. They are interwoven. These realizations reminds me of Rupert Sheldrake's morphic fields, where he anticipates and forecasts quantum mechanics with his morphic fields, the connection between what a concept is and the object, so to speak, the Dinge, the Gestände, which is in itself rather amazing. But let me not digress into that, although it's very interesting. These cuts, we follow the sentence, thereby helping to create and entrench a general division between these two domains. So you get this entrench. Entrench is like a ditch, a deepening of the cut. And we go forward, page 86. He's starting to lead us into the helpful diagrams here, and how it becomes going both from a new one, ouch, when starting with just crying further down on the page. Figure 1 and 2, you can go down to, please, Kalle. The drawing, figure 1, the line, and then the second more telling one, the ouch thing. The ouch comes later and it creates a cut. And we have a development given by the parents that makes everything more refined. And even more so refined on page 87 with figure 3. So he uses sentences only in the minimal sense of repeating them after the adults. Iteration, it starts with iteration. It doesn't start with an ostensive definition. He doesn't know. The toddler is just yodeling. He doesn't know what he's saying. He repeats. But slowly going from the proto-phenomena, there is a development into real words, more and more. It goes to, it hurts, ouch. Mom, my knee hurts. Ooh. That is now a lot of cuts and incisions. And now to the brilliancy, figure 4. And here he does something marvelous. He changed the line and he makes the arrow, instead of a twig, into an incision. An incision is made if you have an apple tree and you can put a branch of pears on the apple tree. And you put them together and lo and behold, you get a tree with both apples and pears. You can compare the crying and the ouch to apples and pears. They are different, but there is a close family resemblance. And a historical, I think you're going to like this, Kalle, etymological connection. They run in history. And the last sentence on that page, or the penultimate, this cutting, no, sorry. In this learning process, language is making a cut upon the natural primitive unity between pain and crying. And what he's showing here, that cut is not necessarily have to be seen as a cut. It could be an incision instead. An incision for growth, for widening, development, expansion. Making the world of the child wider, grander, more understanding, and more communicative and telling. Go to the next page here. And we come to the grafting. Grafting is the technical term for the incision in horticulture. And the third paragraph is very complex here. The third paragraph, and it begins with the change paragraph. Yeah, that's the one. And I like this grafting metaphor. The metaphor of grafting is very apt here, because grafting also involves at once cutting and growing. In both cases, it is a modification of nature by art. Salvador Dali. He is definitely making incisions into reality, graftings. And now on page 89, we get a whole different picture. That's figure 7. And if someone is saying, oh, hey, Hans, I think this figure start looking like the robots of Pfeiffer. You're not far off. And they are all based, so to speak, on an inside and an outside that are shared. Behavior is the same as inside. You can now see that growing complexity and how they go back, the graftings, the incisions, the cuts, and there's this beautiful interwoveness. And I read a sentence under there. This more complicated schema, read against the earlier simpler ones, makes vivid a general process, and listen now, namely the simultaneous growth of two domains, the inner domain of sensations, and the outer domain of sensation expressions. So they are looking quite different, they are quite different, but they are close together at the same time. Now we get a pharmacon, which I would like to call it, for the dualism. Keeping it and still showing sameness, complementarity, almost as was mentioned by Gilles Deleuze in the previous lecture, 1937. And I love the sentence here a bit further down, 4 lines from the bottom. For his outer life, in particular the verbal expressions of sensations that he learns, soon starts to feed back into his inner life, structuring and enriching it, as happens, for instance, when he learns to name the qualities and locations of his sensations. Mom, my knee is hurting. It becomes immensely more advanced. It's an organic whole, as we can read on the very last phrase I chose here, where I paused. Next page, page 90. An organic whole. So now we got an even more beautiful explanation for Stephen Ambrosen's whole and wholeness. How illustrative. And we can make it more and more complex, and learning the taste of vinegar, good wines, and separating Bourgogne from claret, which I cannot do. But you can learn. Kalle Lundahl, please join. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Let's go to the previous page, 31, 89, 89, 89. So it begins, so really on the 88. So here Tang is paraphrasing Wittgenstein. He says adapting, that is paraphrasing Wittgenstein as follows. The origin and the primitive form of our sensational language is a cry. Only from this can more complicated forms develop. Language, we may say, is a refinement. In the beginning was the cry. But let's remember, attention.
Yes.
This is only a paraphrase from Wittgenstein. So what does Wittgenstein really say? And we read in footnote 29. Original passage reads, the origin and the primitive form of language game is a reaction. Only from this can more complicated forms develop. Language, I want to say, is a refinement. In the beginning was the deed. So I want to emphasize this deed. And it's from the book Cultural Value.
Oh, lovely.
So let us keep this in mind when I go to figure 1. I think figure 1 is the most important one of these, actually, because as you, Hans, has argued many times, is that it is in the first stage that we make the errors. That is,
Yeah.
we philosophers usually jump over the first stage. Or in this case, I would say that actually, I'm sorry to say to Tang, he misunderstands the first stage. So I'm sorry to say, Tang, you misunderstand first stage. So here you see the pain and then the arrow to crying. So what is this? So Tang, he implicitly or explicitly prefers the origin, namely the pain. And this is actually a Freudian, Freud probably agree with this. That is, you look always for the original cause.
I see what you mean. Yeah, interesting, yeah. You
And
mean
so
rather
Freud would
crying and
agree.
pain are simultaneous. There should be arrows in both directions.
So Freud would agree with this. Yes, but not Wittgenstein. But not Wittgenstein, I emphasize this. Because as we read, in the origin was actually the deed. So they are simultaneous. So you cannot separate pain from crying.
No.
In quantum
You
physics,
cannot, yeah.
so what does quantum physics emphasize? Causality. We could also say simultaneity.
Yeah, definitely simultaneity.
Okay, our doctor perhaps would say that, okay, first you have the blood comes out and then comes the cry. It could be some delay, but it doesn't matter. It's actually it's everything simultaneous. Or would you disagree, Hans?
No. I think it should have arrows in both directions. Maybe it's just about how he pictured the whole thing, but I do agree. Yeah, should be arrows that pain and crying are simultaneous. Yes, definitely.
So out and everything is, there is no, I think because this also agrees with quantum physics conception that there is no time. Time is, we don't have time in quantum physics. Time comes only after the fact.
Afterwards, time and space comes after. Very good, fantastic.
Well, this, so let me repeat the error here. So the error is that pain is somewhere is the origin. The origin is always, like Freud says, that we have to always find the original cause. In Freud's case, it was the sexuality and so forth. And text of critics, it's the original text. But it's always the same mistake that you're looking for the origin, that you think that there is a time, actually a chronological time that you have to define.
Very good,
but the time comes always after the fact. That's emphasized by Edward de Bono. So sorry to say, okay, this is very sophisticated, and he emphasizes time as simultaneity, but he emphasizes too late. So the error is done in the first stage.
Yes, it should be arrows going both ways. Little helping how here is that crying is, of course, the deed. It's a sort of thing that you do. But of course, it should be arrows in both directions. It's absolutely simultaneous. Maybe an error of orthography on the part of Hao.
Could be. Who knows? I will not be too categorical, harsh on Tang.
Sorry, you disappeared for a second.
No. Yeah, that's possible. I don't want to be too categorical.
No. Good old
or
time.
harsh against Tang.
Good old time.
So let us emphasize that the deed is in the beginning.
Oh yeah, the deed, yeah, definitely. I completely agree. The crying is the deed. The ouch is a bit less like a deed, but what he also shows, these are all deeds, but they are at the same time progressively intellectual or conceptual. And then in the end, you can say it still hurts, but not as much as yesterday, which is rather complex. And the mistake we do is to think that, oh, that phrase has no connection whatsoever with the pain. Now we left the pain. And as you say, the pain here is an original. No, it is simultaneously still. Very good. I think you were very spot on of you pointing that out, Kalle.
So what was the first phrase that you mentioned? Let me see in your commentary. Do you remember which was expression of sensation? Let me see. I want to find that phrase. It was on the previous page. We began with. Let me see. What was the first phrase that you mentioned today in your commentary? Yes, it was this one.
Yes, the etiology of dualism of inner and outer.
So, I think that another error that Tang makes is actually he's blaming the language too much. Okay, language, because for Wittgenstein, the language is both the means and, of course, the blame.
Yeah, indeed.
But Wang forgets the means. That language is actually a means. It's a tool. Okay, the tool aspect. Tang takes it up, but it still becomes a little bit too much on the guilt, pointing too much. I think that although Tang understands, that you have there. That is expressive. He takes it up very cleverly.
It's an expressive.
But still, he points too much fingers at language. He would avoid this problem if he would focus on the simultaneity of everything. Language and doing is simultaneous.
Yeah.
In that way, you get avoid this problem. It's everything is simultaneous. So
I think the dualism he's attacking is also the dualism of before and after. It comes simultaneously, and the pain is not before the expression or the deed, the cry, "Oh!" It is simultaneous. And of course, as you said, a doctor will say first is the pain, but for practical reasons, maybe. But that doesn't mean that the pain is absolutely first before the deed.
And sometimes the pain could also be something that the patient thinks that he has, but that is an illusion or so-called faked, or like in that case with the worker who fell from a house. What was the name?
You're the guy who got that sharp nail in his shoe.
So he imagined the pain, but that is really another case. That is about how we conceive our language. Our bodies. But
yeah,
it doesn't matter that
it's not that bad actually. It's rather good. It's from Couples Blakesley, a book, Body Map. Yeah, I think it's connected here. And it goes to show, since there is no original pain like that per se, he did feel that pain, and that guy didn't really invent the pain because the complexity of the system goes outside the skin of the body. I think it's a rather good example, actually.
Yes, indeed. So it's outside the body. Yes, it's actually outside the body. So this actually proves Freud wrong. This example. So perhaps you could briefly say the example to our audience who doesn't know this. So there is a worker who falls from a...
That's when we first start with the book. It's Couples Blakesley, called the Body Map, if I not misremember, or Body Mapping. And the worker gets an incredible nail in his shoe by mistake. And he senses the pain, he gets morphine and everything. He has the pain. There's no doubt about the pain. But it turns out the nail had stranded in between two toes, never to enter his body. And this is how we are actually working. And I think it's a bit similar to the figure 7 on page 89. It is interwoven. And as you say, happens simultaneously.
Yes, I think that time is creating many problems.
It tells you the
philosophy.
idea of an original as you experience in your work. And as I find sometimes when I speak linguistics, the idea of a thought being first. Here you see them all interconnected.
Mm.
It's a lovely depiction. I really like it. It helps a lot. What do you say? Maybe we should end there, Kalle.
Yes, let's only show this picture, and I chose this picture because it was done in 1938. The name of this lecture in 1938. It's a painted by Dali. It doesn't really have any connection. Besides the fact that Salvador Dali was very he thought with he was very he thought with the right side of this brain.
Definitely.
Really to the.
I think the face could be the interconnection, could be the deed, and the pierce could be what looks to be on the outside, the pain expressions. What do you think about that?
Yes, I don't know. Yes, that's perhaps too much.
Why not? Okay. Well, we'll end there. Thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl, for your excellent comments. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Have a very beautiful morning, day, or afternoon. Bye-bye for now.